The UK property investment market, as we stand today, is pitch perfect. London is effectively a small country, that the provinces are improving fairly rapidly, that retail remains remarkably strong and a very significant area for investment. There is about 2.5 billion of industrial stock currently in the market in the UK. Even with all of the overseas interest in the market, the biggest single movers of the market have been the UK retail funds, who have readjusted pricing from 6.5 to 6 to 5.5 to whatever it takes across almost every sector. Generally, the mood of the market is incredibly positive, and we're finding the hardest place to do a deal at the minute in the UK is Manchester offices.
You've heard the expression before, safe as houses. Lending to UK consumers secured against their houses is pretty much the safest lending business of anything that can be done in the world. In 2010, Greg Clark announced that what was called garden grabbing was to stop. There was no longer a presumption in favour of suburban densification, or particularly no longer a presumption in favour of building in back gardens. The difficulty in relation to new garden cities or substantial greenfield development away from existing settlements, they're rather popular because of the fact there are a few neighbours to complain. The difficulty is they're rather expensive to infrastructure. So between 1998 and 2008, there were about 800,000 net jobs created. Between 2010 and 2014, there were 2.1 million new private sector jobs created. The level of job creation in the UK economy in the last 4 years has been utterly extraordinary. You can expect to see, realistically, more big sites coming forward, which is what the government have been trying to promote. But to repeat myself, it has to be in that Britsland area. We've gone from 59 million in 1999 to 64 million today. So, and if that is to continue, and we are to accommodate that population growth, there basically are only those two choices. So we build in back gardens in Boreham Wood, or we release green fields.
My key observation in retail going forwards is that we've seen a revolution in the last 5 to 10 years at the occupier and consumer side of the market. If you look at some of our shopping centres in the last year, they're trending at retail sales around 4 to 5% growth. So that is very healthy levels of growth. The consumer is more considered, and impulse is much less of a feature. We know the retail market is changing. We know that not every location is going to win. And we know that retailers are reducing the number of units they want to sell from. The offer has to offer more than purely retail. You know, the fact that people are researching in our mouths, it means you've got to have the hygiene factors of free Wi-Fi. Urbanisation is, and probably over a 10 or 20 year period, going to be a factor around retail destination. 20 years ago, 7 retailers was the average number of retailers that people would shop with. Today, it is 13. We believe that there are 3 areas, what we define as winning locations for retail. And those are built around convenience, experience, and luxury. It's more than shops. It's about place making. It's about iconic destinations. The Darwinian effect of retail isn't going to change. So we have to go with that market. We have to go with the change in retail.
Property is really being used as the battleground for the war for talent, certainly in Silicon Valley. We're seeing that play out in London. There's something incredible going on at Old Street Roundabout. There's 8 tech companies, and within a few years that turned into 1,500. In terms of stock absorption from the property industry, we've now seen the TMT sector, if you like, overtake financial services in London. In the first part of this year, we've seen 1.2 billion of venture capital come into the London venture industry, and that's really driving driving and supercharging some of the growth of these firms. The absorption of stock is taking place in East London, but genuinely this streak, if you like, of occupancy goes from Reading in through Paddington, in through Hammersmith, right the way through central London, across to Hackney, and is blowing east out towards city airports. Co-working in London is going like a train at the moment, and the growth in that sector of the market is kind of extraordinary. I keep referring to this sense of serious informality. There is incredible value being created in these companies in very informal environments. The tech industry is very demanding of design, and they're also slightly nervous of venture capitalists or property investors, developers looking to take equity in their companies. Genuinely, the food offer is Michelin star. There's yoga studios, there's open kitchens, very strong focus on cycling, and this sense of very light, very bright, loft-style working is definitely in vogue in this sector. This is economically hugely significant for London and the UK. It's contributing 8% to UK GDP.
It is time to start designing for our ears and with our ears. Many retailers do not think about the sound that they're creating in their spaces. Super additivity. In the world of the senses, 1 + 1 is not 2. 1 + 1 can be 10, even 20, by aligning congruent messaging in all of the senses, and particularly in sight and sound. People conflate two very different things: cost saving and productivity. These are not the same things. And unfortunately, a lot of people driven by the need to save money think they are. They think if we cram people in, it's more productive. Well, it isn't, actually. If you conflate those two things, what you get is not productivity, it's misery. Noise is now the #1 complaint in office space. You can have an office that's too quiet, as well as an office that's too noisy. There is a happy medium in the middle. There's something in the middle around 45 to 55 decibels. That's about ideal. And you can create that by adding masking sound to a too quiet office or putting sound-absorbing materials in a too noisy office. For collaborative working, then an open plan office is ideal. Great. Unfortunately, that's not all we do. And the received wisdom is that open plan works for everything. It does not. We must create different types of working environment. Concentration requires a place where the rule is, shh, no talking here. And contemplation, maybe you're chilling out after a big meeting or thinking great strategic thoughts, more of a Zen type space just to decompress.
We help build what has now become a true asset class in its own right. It certainly wasn't the case 15 years ago. China's the clear leader in growth in tertiary enrollments. I think now they've got 32 million full-time students in higher education. What we're focused on as a business really is all about this global drive to a knowledge economy. The general picture is of one of sustained demand growth, which is great. London's still structurally undersupplied. Loads and loads of students cannot find access to well-located, affordable serviced accommodation. It's a sector driven by a structural undersupply, rental growth as a result every year, even through economic downturns.
The world is flush with money. That's not the issue. It's going to be about finding the opportunities.
The one thing I love hearing as an agent is people saying, there'll be no stock, there'll be no stock. You know, guess what? Over 30 years, there's always been stock coming through, and it will come from somewhere.
We can't afford to be precious and say tech can only happen round a roundabout in North London. These things move by definition.
High street, of course, as a term means many different things. The difficulty is disparity of ownership, and so where those owners can come together, the occupiers can come together.
Death, taxes, and private housing starts in the UK as being the three great certainties of life.